The hardest lesson my first year of retirement taught me was not about money. That surprised me. I had planned for the savings. I had handled the Medicare decisions. Richard and I knew what the mortgage situation was. We had a budget, even if ours was more comfortable than the word usually implies. My adult children were grown. The fixed income question wasn't the central drama in our house. So I thought I was prepared. I was not. The lesson was quieter than that. I had to learn that being finished with work did not mean I knew how to be finished proving myself. That was the part I didn't see coming. I had spent decades building things. Small things at first, then larger things. Then things with payroll, attorneys, leases, clients, problems, women calling me because they were trying to build something of their own and thought I might know where the floorboards were loose. I was good at it. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't. Then the first year of retirement arrived and no one was asking me to be good at anything. Not urgently, not daily, not in the way I knew how to understand. And one Tuesday morning, standing in my bedroom in a blazer I had no reason to wear, I realized I did not know whether I missed the work or I missed the woman I became when people needed me to do it. That is a different question. And I did not like the answer that was starting to form. You wake up and the calendar is clean, and that feels suspicious. Not good weird, just weird. My exact fear was that I had built a very capable woman and then retired into a life that had no real use for her. I know how that sounds. There are worse problems. I have lived through some of them. I've had bad quarters, bad partners, expensive lessons, and one decision in my 40s that cost me 2 years and an amount of money I still don't enjoy saying out loud. But this was not a business problem. That was the difficulty. I knew how to fix business problems. I knew who to call. I knew what to review. I knew when to be patient and when to become very difficult in a very calm voice. Retirement did not respond to that skill set. It just sat there, open, polite, unimpressed with my resume. I'm not going to give you a 5-step system. I'm just going to tell you what happened and what Richard and I figured out. Some of it took longer than I wanted. Some of it I resisted because I was proud. And some of it was so obvious that I almost missed it completely. So we're in the bedroom and I'm buttoning a navy blazer. This was maybe 4 months into retirement, maybe 5. I remember the shoes more than the date, which tells you something about me. Cream slingbacks, good ones, not new, but good. I had written down a dinner in my calendar, a business dinner, or what I thought was a business dinner. I had the time, the restaurant, the name. I even put on earrings my mother would have approved of. Richard was standing in the doorway. He looked at me for a moment and said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Dinner with Marlene and the 2 women from Boca." He said that was 3 weeks ago. I was already irritated before I checked. I don't admire that about myself, but there it is. I looked at the calendar. He was right. The dinner had happened 3 weeks earlier. I had gone. It had been pleasant. I had apparently stored the old appointment in my mind like an emergency exit. I stood there in that blazer for 10 minutes. Then I sat on the edge of the bed. There's a version of this story where I laugh immediately, where I'm charming about it, where I say something elegant and self-aware. That's not the one I'm telling. The truth is I felt foolish, not because I had made a scheduling mistake. I've made worse mistakes. I once hired a woman because I liked her shoes. That cost me 6 months and taught me several things about shoes and hiring. This felt foolish because part of me had wanted the dinner to be real. I wanted a reason to be dressed. I wanted the old shape of a day. Richard sat next to me and didn't say anything for a while, which is one of his better qualities. Then he said, "You're not bored, you're lost. Those aren't the same." I didn't speak to him for 2 hours. Then I came back and said, "You're right." That was the realization. Not the lesson yet. Just the moment I understood I was not resting. I was wandering. So I want to go through 5 things that first year taught me. Not rules, not advice from a woman who has finished the assignment. I have not finished it. These are things I noticed after the work stopped, after the calendar opened, and after I had to admit that a clean page can be more frightening than a full one. The first thing I learned was that competence is not the same as identity. I had confused them for a long time. When I was working, competence was my language. I could walk into a room, read the problem, find the weak point, and decide whether the person across from me was confused, dishonest, afraid, or all 3. That sounds harsher than I mean it. But if you've ever built anything, you know the difference matters. Then retirement arrived, and nobody handed me a problem at breakfast. For the first few weeks, that felt luxurious. I would sit outside with coffee, Florida light coming in sideways, Richard reading something serious and not feeling the need to explain it to me, the house quiet. I thought, this is what I worked for. Then week 4 came, then week 7, then month 3, and I started manufacturing usefulness. I reorganized a closet that did not require my leadership. I reviewed insurance documents Richard had already reviewed. I offered Sophie an opinion about a vendor she had not asked me about. That one was not my finest moment. Sophie is my daughter. She lives nearby. She is building her own thing, which means she is tired in a way I recognize and can't always help. She had mentioned a contractor casually, as part of a story. I heard it as an invitation. It was not. I sent her 3 names, 2 warnings, and a question that began with, "Have you considered?" Nothing good begins with a mother saying, "Have you considered?" She called me that evening. She said, "Mom, I love you, but I was telling you something, not opening a file." I had to sit with that, because I knew exactly what she meant. I had turned a conversation into a case. That was when I figured out competence can become a costume. You wear it long enough and people stop seeing your face. I was not trying to be controlling, I was trying to be useful. But usefulness without invitation can feel like control to the person receiving it. That was uncomfortable. And Richard would say I needed the discomfort. He would be right, unfortunately. The next thing I learned was that a full calendar can hide a thin life. I don't mean that dramatically, I mean it literally. For years, my calendar was evidence. If the week was full, I was relevant. If the calls were stacked, I was in demand. If the dinner ran long, it meant the conversation mattered. Or at least that's what I told myself. The first year of retirement removed that evidence. At first, I tried to replace it. Lunch with this person, coffee with that one, a non-profit breakfast, a committee invitation, a women in business event where I knew half the people and wanted to avoid the other half. I went anyway. I was overdressed for almost all of it. This is one of my flaws. I can make a casual lunch look like deposition prep. One Thursday, I came home from a charity planning meeting feeling strangely tired. Not physically tired, more like I had spent 2 hours being a person I used to understand. Richard was in the kitchen making tea. He looked at me and said, "Did you enjoy that?" I said, "It was useful." He said, "That wasn't the question." I hate when he does that. He doesn't do it often. That's why it works. The truth was, I had not enjoyed it. I had performed well. Those are different. I had asked the right questions. I had remembered names. I had been generous but not too eager. I had offered help in a way that did not obligate me beyond what I was willing to give. All very competent, all very empty. That night, I looked at the next month on my calendar. It was full, and I felt the same dread I used to feel when a quarter was going badly. That made no sense. These were things I had chosen. That was the problem. I had chosen them for the wrong reason. Not because I cared, not really. I had chosen them because open space made me feel like I was becoming invisible. I don't fully understand why visibility can become so addictive, especially for women who spent years trying to be taken seriously in rooms that were not built with us in mind. You work so hard to be seen clearly. Then retirement offers you privacy, and part of you treats it like punishment. That's when I started removing things, quietly, no announcements, no grand declarations. I simply stopped saying yes to invitations that made me feel polished and hollow. The calendar became less impressive. My days became more honest. There was one Sunday morning when that became clearer than I wanted. I had taken out my father's old leather ledger. Harold kept everything. Neat columns, dates, receipts folded into envelopes with the month written on them in his small accountant handwriting. I was not looking for anything useful. I think I wanted proof that careful people can prepare their way out of uncertainty. My father would have smiled at that, quietly. Then he would have gone back to sharpening a pencil. Inside the ledger was a receipt from 1978 for a winter coat my mother bought on sale. $42. He had underlined the discount. I sat there holding it and thought, my parents had so much less room in their lives than I do, and somehow they wasted less of it trying to prove they deserved the room they had. That stayed with me. That did not happen immediately. I still overcommitted at least 4 times after that, because apparently I enjoy relearning lessons in expensive shoes. But I began to notice the difference between a day that looked meaningful and a day that felt lived. The third thing I learned was that marriage after work is its own arrangement. Richard retired 3 years before I did. He did it with an irritating amount of grace. He had breakfast, he walked, he read, he fixed one thing badly and then hired someone appropriate. He spoke to friends. He did not appear to suffer a crisis of identity. I watched this from across the room for 3 years with great confusion and occasional resentment. When I retired, I assumed I would catch up to his ease. I did not. Instead, I brought my unfinished work energy into his peaceful house. Our peaceful house, technically. But in that first year, I acted like a guest executive in a home office merger. I had opinions about everything, where things belonged, what time errands should happen, how the pantry was arranged, whether the terrace furniture needed replacing, whether the guest room had become, in my words, a holding area for indecision. Richard listened to most of this. Then one morning he said, I retired before you. I did not retire under you. I looked at him. He looked back. Then I laughed, because he was correct, and because the alternative was becoming a woman neither of us wanted to spend lunch with. That sentence changed something, not all at once, but enough. For years our marriage had a rhythm built around 2 busy people. We met in the middle, dinner when we could, travel when it worked, Shabbat when we were home, family things, holidays, calls with Jonathan, visits with Sophie and the children. We loved each other inside a life with pressure around it. Then the pressure changed. Suddenly there was more time to notice tone, more time to repeat small irritations, more time to discover that Richard had opinions about towels. Towels. After 38 years of marriage, a man reveals himself. I had spent decades thinking of myself as the particular one. Then I retired and learned my husband has a preferred towel fold. I'm still processing that. But underneath the humor was something real. We had to stop treating extra time as automatically intimate. More time together does not automatically mean more closeness. Sometimes it just means more chances to be careless. I had to learn to enter Richard's day with respect, not because he was fragile, he is not, because he had built a retirement before I arrived in mine, and I had no right to colonize it just because I was newly available. That word may be too strong, it is also accurate. The fourth thing I learned was that adult children do not become available just because their mother retires. I should have known this. I did know this, intellectually. But feelings are not always impressed by intellect. Jonathan lives in New York. He works in finance. He is very good at it. Better at certain things than I ever was, though I say that here more easily than I say it to his face. Sophie is nearby with Adam and the children. Noah is 9 and negotiates everything. Claire is 6 and has the moral certainty of a Supreme Court justice. I imagined retirement would mean more of them, more ordinary time, more dinners, more picking up the children, more long conversations with Sophie where she would ask for my perspective and I would give exactly the right amount. This fantasy lasted maybe 12 days. Children have their own lives, adult children especially. They are not empty shelves waiting for their retired parents to place new meaning on them. One afternoon, I called Jonathan because I had seen something that reminded me of him. That was fine. Then I kept him on the phone because I had nowhere else to put my attention. That was less fine. He finally said, kindly but directly, "Mom, I want to talk to you. I just can't become the structure of your afternoon." That sentence hurt. It also helped. Because he did not say he didn't want me. He said he could not become my structure. Those are different things. With Sophie, the lesson came through Claire. I had gone over to help with the children. Sophie was tired. I could see it in the way she was standing. Mothers recognize that posture. Grandmothers recognize it and try very hard not to say too much. Claire wanted to choose her own dress for dinner. It was purple, had a stain, and was not dinner appropriate by any standard my mother would have accepted. I started to redirect her. Sophie gave me a look, not a harsh one, just a daughter's look that says, "Please do not turn this into a generational event." So I stopped. Claire wore the purple dress. No one died. This is the kind of wisdom retirement gives you. Very humbling material. That evening, Sophie said, "I like having you here when you're just here." I knew what she meant. Not improving, not advising, not managing, just here. That was harder than I expected. The fifth thing I learned was that I needed something to build, but I had to choose it differently. This channel came from that, partly. Not because I wanted attention. I had enough attention in my life. Some of it was useful, some of it was exhausting, some of it came from people who wanted free consulting over salmon. This came from a different place. Younger women kept asking me questions at dinners. Women in their 40s, 50s, sometimes early 60s. They wanted to know how I knew when to sell, how I handled a bad partner, how I stayed married through the busiest years, how I stopped, whether stopping felt like relief. You cannot answer some questions between the appetizer and the check. I tried, badly. I would give them a polished answer, something true but too clean. Then I would go home and think about what I should have said. Richard noticed. He said, "You're still editing the conversation 3 hours later." I said, "Because I didn't answer it well." He said, "Then answer it somewhere else." That was the beginning. Not a business plan, not a strategy, just a place to put the thoughts that were too long for dinner and too personal for a panel. The mistake would have been making retirement another performance. I was tempted. Of course I was. I know how to make things look finished. I know how to sit in a good chair, wear the correct blouse, speak in complete thoughts, and make uncertainty sound like refinement. That is useful in some rooms. It is deadly in others. Here, I had to practice being less polished than my instincts prefer. Not sloppy, never sloppy. My mother would come back just to object, but less arranged, more willing to say, I don't know yet. I've earned the right to not know the answer to that. That's a sentence I say to myself often now. Because in the first year of retirement, I learned that building after retirement cannot come from fear, not if it's going to be honest. It can't come from the fear of disappearing. It can't come from the need to prove you are still sharp. It can't come from trying to recreate the old stage with softer lighting. It has to come from interest, from usefulness that is offered, not forced, from a question that keeps returning even when no one is paying you to answer it. That was the difference. Work used to be the container. Now I have to choose the container more carefully. Some days I choose well. Some days I make a committee out of a teacup. Richard remains patient, mostly. I don't want to make the first year sound more dramatic than it was. No one should feel sorry for me. I don't feel sorry for me. I had comfort. I had my health. I had Richard. I had children who loved me enough to tell me the truth in complete sentences. And still, it was hard. Not hard in the way life can be cruel. Hard in the way a mirror can be honest. I saw how much of myself had been built around being capable. I saw how quickly I reached for usefulness when I felt uncertain. I saw that rest was not the same as peace. I'm still learning the difference. If something in here landed for you, leave a comment. Tell me the hardest lesson your first year of retirement taught you. Not the polished one, the real one. Was it the quiet, the marriage rhythm, the adult children being busy, the calendar, the feeling that you had prepared for the money and somehow not prepared for yourself? I read those comments. I find them useful, more useful than I expected to. And if you're not retired yet, tell me what part you're privately wondering about. The question you don't ask at dinner because everyone else is being cheerful. Those are usually the questions worth keeping. I'll leave it there. Take good care.